These meals were born from sweat and grime, from calloused hands and long 12-hour shifts standing at the machine. Meals for the old working class didn't need to be fancy. They just needed to fill the stomach. A mixed stew, maybe some leftover bones, helped them keep going. Something the well-fed, wealthy folks would never understand. Today, let's travel back in time to explore 25 special dishes that once sustained an entire generation of working people, proving that a precious spirit can create culinary masterpieces that money just can't buy. Back in the 1930s through the 1960s, when African-American families made the Great Migration north looking for factory work, they brought their Southern cooking culture with them. Pig neck bones were nearly free at city butcher shops back then, and they made the most of it. To make this dish, these neck bones weren't just boiled, they had to be simmered for 3 to 4 hours. The bones were cooked with onions, garlic, and bay leaves. The long simmering process was the key to making the meat fall easily off the bone, and more importantly, the bone marrow melted completely into the broth, creating a rich, gelatinous liquid. Then, navy beans or pinto beans that had been soaked overnight were added and cooked until the dish reached a thick, creamy consistency. This meal is survival cooking elevated, turning the butcher's scraps into a cherished Sunday dinner. This simple dish could feed 6 people for under $2. The collagen released from the bones created a smooth, sauce-like texture, coating every bean, offering the warm comfort needed for the soul after a tiring work week. When Dad came home from the steel mill, exhausted after a 10-hour shift under dangerous conditions, Mom often prioritized fried liver with mashed potatoes. During the 1920s through the 1960s, beef or pork liver was a great economical choice for the working class, costing just a fraction of the price of steak. Thick slices of liver had to be soaked in milk for about an hour to remove the unpleasant, bitter metallic taste. Afterward, the liver was seasoned with flour and fried right in a blazing hot cast iron skillet with bacon grease. The cook had to watch carefully, frying only 2 minutes per side so the outside was crispy brown, but the inside still maintained that ideal pink color. Onions were also an essential part. They were cooked slowly in the same bacon grease until they caramelized, then piled on top of the liver. This dish was an abundant source of iron, which kept steel workers and miners going before vitamin supplements became common. Anyone who has tried it knows that overcooked liver turns rubbery. But when done right, this was truly a star during hard times, supplying the essential nutrients the worker's body needed. And naturally, the wealthy folks weren't too keen on this kind of making-do meal. In the 1950s, TV dinners arrived as a revolution in the working-class kitchen. It turned the family dinner into a convenient, individual tray. Its debut is tied to Swanson, introducing the first TV dinner in 1953, originally featuring turkey, cornbread stuffing, peas, and sweet potatoes. This meal represented the post-war American philosophy of efficiency and convenience. The parents' work was simplified to the max. Just buy the frozen dinner for under $1, slide the foil tray into the oven for 25 minutes. The meal was served right on the tray, no messy dishes to wash. This convenience was revolutionary for working families balancing jobs and home life. The TV dinner marked the beginning of fast food culture, where saving time became more important than the quality of a homemade dish. And for the upper class, where meals were elaborate down to every detail, experiencing this kind of dinner would likely be difficult. If you've also experienced or heard stories about this TV dinner, please hit hype and comment below to see if others' experiences match yours. And if you've never known about it, what do you think of this way of eating? During the Great Depression, when even a simple turkey leg was a luxury, working-class mothers created a culinary illusion called mock chicken legs. This dish turned cheap ground pork and veal into something that looked like prosperity on a plate. It became strongly popular in the 1930s and lasted through the 1950s, and in old factory towns, it was also known as city chicken. To make it, cheap cuts of pork and veal were ground up. The meat mixture was seasoned with sage, thyme, salt, and pepper. Then, the meat was carefully molded around a popsicle stick or a wooden skewer, shaping it exactly like a chicken drumstick. These chicken legs were rolled in egg, coated with breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs, and then fried until the outer crust was crispy and golden brown. This presentation offered dignity and pride to families, allowing them to serve a dish that resembled the Sunday chicken dinner that the wealthy enjoyed. The rich and savory flavor of the dish, along with the firm texture inside, surprised many, acting as a perfect visual deception. Perhaps the upper class never heard of it, because this dish only appeared in the poor working-class kitchens, especially in mountainous regions. It was seen as bacon that never spoils, suitable for a useful survival food. Basically, it's a form of meat preserved by careful salting. Fatback was sliced thin and fried slowly in a cast-iron skillet. This process caused the pure pig fat to melt into lard, leaving crispy crackling swimming in the hot grease. Most importantly, the pure lard was saved to cook everything else in the kitchen. Mountain families relied on fatback to add flavor and essential calories to other bland survival foods. This was the essential calorie source that helped the worker's body survive harsh winters. My grandmother even used to say that back then, just a small piece of fatback could transform a pot of beans or greens from subsistence food into something almost luxurious. When the family budget was tight, Mom could turn a single pound of beef into a rich-like dinner for 5, sometimes 6 people. And the secret lay right in the seemingly simple stuffed bell peppers with ground beef and rice. This was considered a culinary strategy. First, the ground beef was lightly sautéed, then mixed with rice, the starch that helped extend the volume of the meat. This mixture was seasoned with tomato sauce or dry herbs. After stuffing the bell peppers, the dish was baked with whatever sauce was left over in the pantry. Rice was the magical ingredient that stretched the small amount of meat. This meal created leftovers that didn't look like leftovers, and it was easy to double or triple the recipe to feed a whole group. This smart dish provided meat, starch, and vegetables in a single meal, completely solving the side dish problem, filling the stomach, and tasting as rich as our own home. Meatloaf isn't just an American dish. It's a living symbol of survival for an entire generation. From the Great Depression all the way into the 70s, this dish appeared regularly on working families' tables, at least twice a month. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, eggs, milk, onions, and anything else that needed to be used up, from leftover oats and rice to mashed potatoes. The goal of adding these ingredients was to maximize the volume of the meat. The most distinctive feature of this dish is the glaze on top. It's a simple mixture of tomato sauce, brown sugar, and sometimes mustard to create a shiny, caramelized layer. This meal stretched ground beef further than any other preparation method, reliable, comforting, and providing the perfect ingredient for a cold meatloaf sandwich the next day. Smart mothers often shaped it freely on the baking sheet to maximize surface area, helping the edges get perfectly crispy. Which dinner on this list brought you back to your grandmother's kitchen? Share your family's special recipe in the comments below. There were days when the stew on the stove wasn't sirloin or beef shoulder, but beef heart and rutabaga stew. This dish used a lean, muscular, flavorful cut if the cook knew how to handle it slowly. Beef heart was a popular choice during the Depression because it was cheap and readily available. To prepare this dish, the beef heart was carefully trimmed, sliced, and quickly pan-seared. Then, the meat was simmered over low heat for many hours with broth or water. Grandma would often add bay leaves or a splash of vinegar to break down the muscle fibers and deepen the flavor. Rutabagas were added to the stew not just for vegetables, but also to balance the characteristic sweet and earthy flavor. This meal provided warmth from the inside out. It was a quiet victory for those who learned to cook by being resourceful with what they had on hand. This dish created something honest, nutrient-rich, and cozy from a humble ingredient often overlooked by the wealthy. When I was little, we always knew which day the neighbors were cooking ham hocks and cabbage. Just stepping onto the porch, the aroma would drift down the street on the wind. In the small kitchen, the chipped enamel pot would bubble away, and from the cheapest ingredients came a meal that made the whole neighborhood feel warm. Ham hocks were so cheap, everyone could afford them. Cabbage was even cheaper. But when you put everything into one pot, kept the heat low, and waited patiently, this dish suddenly became something far exceeding its price. The ham hock meat was so tender it fell right off the bone with just a touch. The cabbage soaked up the smoky, sugary broth in a way that only long simmering can achieve. In factory neighborhoods, this was the end-of-day rescue meal. No recipe, no measuring cups, no fuss, and that simplicity is exactly what made this dish special. It's a dish that doesn't show off, but leaves the deepest mark in memory, almost a reminder that sometimes the simplest things are what bond a family together most enduringly. Since Grandma and Grandpa's time, the leftover salt pork and bones after Easter or Christmas were never thrown away. Everything was saved, and the salt pork and broccoli casserole was born, feeding the entire family for days on end. The method sounds simple, but it was an art of making do. Cubed salt pork mixed with blanched broccoli, often the frozen kind because it was cheaper and always in the freezer. The sauce was a combination of pure convenience food, cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, thinned with milk, plus cheddar cheese and powdered mustard. The topping was made from crushed Ritz crackers mixed with melted butter. The casserole was then baked until golden and bubbling. This recipe helped stretch the salt pork across 3 more dinners. Opening a box and a package counted as cooking, but the result still delivered warmth and satisfaction. The cracker topping added the necessary crunch, making the dish both cozy and satisfying. In the 1960s, the golden age of convenience cuisine and booming suburbs, this dish appeared on nearly every working person's table. When good cuts of meat became a luxury, families turned to an option few paid attention to: a rough, bony cut of meat, not highly valued, oxtail. The preparation started with quickly searing the oxtail, then simmering it for hours along with onions, garlic, chopped carrots, and barley. Water or broth was added, slow simmered until the meat fell off the bone. The liquid in the pot naturally thickened from the bone marrow and the starch of the barley. The oxtail and barley stew broth was incredibly rich and smooth, completely deserving of the hours of waiting. A rough, bony cut of meat, not highly valued, but with a little patience, it revealed a deeper flavor than any expensive cut. This wasn't something to show off, nor a dish for fancy receptions. But in kitchens familiar with the fire, oxtail became the soul of slow-cooked stews. Of course, not everyone had time to make those complicated dishes. Some needed something simpler, like yesterday's leftovers sandwiched between bread. This was considered the bento of the working world. No preparation hassle, no need for reheating, just assemble the sandwich and go. This wasn't a random leftover meal, but one carefully planned right from the previous day's meatloaf preparation. This is where not a single bit of waste was allowed, and thus every meal had to be planned ahead. Slices of cold, firm meatloaf from the day before were neatly sandwiched between 2 slices of white or toasted bread. This dish was often served with a thin layer of yellow mustard, mayonnaise, or simple ketchup. This meal was considered the ultimate Monday victory. It was humble, reliable, and incredibly effective at providing energy for the worker, and easy to transport. Meatloaf actually tastes better when cold because it cuts neatly, the texture is much firmer, and the flavors meld perfectly if left overnight in the refrigerator. One item the upper class rarely knew or used back then was the slow cooker, the crock pot. This was a true hero of the working class, and pot roast is one of the quintessential dishes for this cooking method. This meal completely changed the commuting habits of parents back then. Instead of having to wake up early to roast or prepare complicated stews, the job was simply layering the raw ingredients: chuck roast, potatoes, carrots, onions, and celery into the ceramic pot. A little beef broth was poured over the top, the lid sealed, and the pot started its silent work for 8 hours. Every morning, commute began with a promise. When the workday ended, the aroma of slow-cooked pot roast would fill the hallway, welcoming those returning home tired. The tough cut from the day before was now tender enough to shred with just the touch of a fork. The vegetables steeped in rich gravy. For busy families, this set-it-and-forget-it cooking method not only made dinner possible, but also provided a cozy feeling, like meticulous care had been taken all day for the workers returning after their shift. On weekends, when the whole family got a break, breaded veal cutlets was the dish that felt a little fancier, making dinner feel like payday. This was considered the unexpected upgrade for dinner, popular on weekends. To make this dish, the cook used cheap slices of veal, breaded in multiple layers, dipped in flour, egg, then breadcrumbs. The veal was quickly fried in a hot pan until the crust reached a beautiful crispy gold. This crispy cutlet was served with instant mashed potatoes, the creamy, fluffy, hot kind. This meal was quick to cook and quick to please everyone, a real victory for families juggling time, bills, and hungry mouths. This dish had excellent crispiness, rich flavor, and a touch of class without having to spend too much. My mother often called tamale pie casserole a cozy meal that could be prepared instantly from ingredients already in the pantry and popped straight into the oven. This dish was inspired by Tex-Mex, but simplified and adapted to fit the economical working-class kitchen. To prepare it, ground beef was lightly sautéed. Then it was mixed with canned corn and tomato sauce or ketchup, adding basic seasonings like chili powder and cumin. The topping was usually crushed salty cracker crumbs or a mixture of cornmeal and milk. The casserole was then baked until the topping was golden and crispy. This casserole was very easy to make, feeding a whole family with less than 10 minutes of preparation. It was also an excellent backup meal because the leftovers tasted even better after a night in the refrigerator. Tamale pie casserole delivered warmth and deep flavor without being complicated. On those days at the end of the month, when the money in the wallet ran low, creamy tuna noodle casserole was the savior from the pantry. The dish came from a box, but delivered a complete dinner. This meal is a type of anti-depression cooking, relying entirely on economy and using available ingredients. The process starts with making a simple white sauce from butter, flour, and milk. Then, drained canned tuna, salt, and pepper were added. Sometimes a handful of frozen peas was also included. Finally, this creamy tuna sauce mixture was thoroughly mixed with boiled egg noodles. Just a few cans, a bag of noodles, and a little milk made a full dinner. This meal helped fill the empty stomachs in the final days of the month, right before payday. Kids loved this dish because it was soft, gentle, and pleasantly creamy. When you mention Johnny Marzetti, many people immediately recall community gatherings in church basements. This dish was created in Columbus, Ohio in the 1920s. It was considered the Midwest's answer to Italian lasagna, but much easier and more economical. It quickly became the ultimate community dinner because it could be made in large quantities for just a few cents per serving. The recipe starts by browning ground beef along with onions and green bell peppers. This mixture is then simmered with canned tomato sauce, tomato paste, and Italian seasoning. Finally, it's mixed with elbow macaroni or cooked egg noodles and shredded cheddar cheese. The dish is then baked until bubbling and slightly crispy around the edges. Johnny Marzetti fed church basements, school cafeterias, and family gatherings. This is a perfect example of American pragmatism, feeding factory workers with a powerful combination of carbs, protein, and cheese. The beauty of this dish is its flexibility. The cook just could add mushrooms, olives, or whatever needed to be used up. If these stories of resourcefulness and childhood meals touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can continue preserving these wonderful memories together. When I was little, chicken fried steak was the meal of the Southern working class, their answer to fancy steak dinners. This dish became popular on every diner menu and dinner table from the 1920s onward. To make this meal, cheap cube steak was used, breaded multiple times, coated in flour, buttermilk, then flour again. The meat was fried in hot oil or lard in a cast iron skillet until dark, golden brown, and crispy. The secret lies in the white gravy, made right in the same pan. Flour is whisked into the hot grease, then milk is slowly added until the sauce is thick and smooth, seasoned with pepper. This dish transformed tough cube steak into a tender, crispy glory. This is a celebratory meal disguised as an everyday worker's dinner. This meal is pure comfort, rich and perfect when drizzled with peppered white gravy over the accompanying mashed potatoes. For Eastern European immigrant families, stuffed cabbage rolls was a dish that demonstrated labor-intensive love. This meal turned a humble vegetable into a dish packed with tradition. This was a familiar dish in the kitchens of immigrant families and tenements from the 1890s to the 1970s. To make this dish, cabbage leaves were separated and blanched in hot water. Then, each leaf was carefully rolled around a mixture of ground beef or pork mixed with rice, onions, and seasoning. These cabbage rolls were simmered over low heat for hours in a rich tomato sauce made from canned tomatoes, brown sugar, and vinegar. This dish was affectionately called Grandma's cooking, showing love and thoughtfulness through hours of meticulous work, and it fed the whole family for days. Rolling the cabbage requires patience and skill, but the reward is a deep, rich dish that combines sweet, sour, and savory flavors. Back then, Spam and fried eggs was breakfast for dinner. It was the savior that sustained families when grocery money ran low right before payday. Spam was introduced by Hormel in 1937 and played a crucial role feeding soldiers in World War II and then working families for decades. The method is very quick. A block of Spam is cut into thick slices, then fried in a cast iron skillet until the edges become crispy. The grease rendered from the Spam was saved and immediately used to fry the eggs. This meal was often served with toast or baked biscuits. The cost of this meal was under $1 and took only about 10 minutes to finish. It was practical, salty, and fast fuel for bodies that worked hard all day. Spam delivers an unmistakable strong saltiness, and eggs add the necessary fat and protein to stay healthy. Turkey pot pie is resourcefulness elevated to art. Instead of wasting leftover meat after Thanksgiving, this dish turned excess turkey into a golden, crispy, crusted masterpiece. This was an economical way to stretch the major holiday expense across several subsequent meals. First, the turkey bones were simmered into broth. That rich liquid was then used to make the creamy filling, combining cubed turkey meat, frozen mixed vegetables, and a sauce thickened with a roux. The filling was poured into a pie shell and topped with crust or crescent roll dough. The dish was baked until the crust was golden and flaky. This was economic thrift tight enough to fit the smallest budget. Although it was born out of necessity, this dish still felt special and fancy enough to serve to guests. For kids back then, Bologna boats wasn't just dinner. It was a culinary adventure. This dish was a creative way to turn cheap cold cuts into something that looked like a real meal. This dish was widely popular throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the peak of convenience and creative cooking. To form the shape, thick slices of Bologna were lightly scored on the edges. They were baked on a tray until the slices curled up into small cups, forming the boat shape. These boats were then filled with available ingredients like shredded cheese, mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, or scrambled eggs. Sometimes a layer of crushed salty cracker crumbs was sprinkled on top. This meal, made from pre-processed mystery meat, played an important role in helping mothers create dinner from odds and ends, and more importantly, getting kids to eat. The salty, melted, and creamy flavor was exactly what a child craved after a long day of playing. In my memory, bean and bacon soup was a Depression-era staple, the nutritional foundation that fed families for days on just a few dollars. During the period from the 1930s to the 1960s, dried beans were one of the cheapest and easiest proteins to find. To cook, navy or Great Northern beans were soaked overnight. Then, they were simmered for hours along with bacon, onions, carrots, and celery. The extended simmering process caused everything to dissolve into a thick, creamy comfort. This soup was served with pieces of bread, often stale bread for dipping. The soup was filling and kept people warm. This was the ultimate make-ahead meal because it tasted much better over the next few days. This was farmers' food, helping people survive through tough times. The bacon added necessary smoke and fat, transforming the humble bean soup into a warm feast. When talking about the soul-soothing dishes of working families in the 1960s to 1970s, many people will smile remembering a special dish, so famous it was given an affectionate, mysterious nickname, funeral potatoes. That's cheesy potato casserole, a side dish with soothing power, always appearing at community potlucks or even funerals. The recipe is simple but extremely effective. Thawed shredded hash brown potatoes, cream of chicken soup, sour cream, melted butter, and generous cheddar cheese. The crispy topping of crushed cornflakes mixed with melted butter created a highlight before the entire dish was baked until golden brown and attractively bubbly. This dish didn't just fill hungry bellies, but also brought a feeling of familiar warmth. The creamy, crispy, and melted cheese combination was like a gentle hug, reminding everyone of those simple but loving family meals where community and family always stood together. And just when folks thought they couldn't be more resourceful, some had to hunt for the first fresh meat after the lean winter months. Groundhog stew was one such meal. Mountain families often hunted groundhogs that had just woken up in February, right when stored meat supplies were dangerously low. To remove the gamey taste, the groundhog meat was cut into pieces and soaked overnight in brine. Then, the meat was lightly seared in lard. The dish was simmered with water, foraged wild onions, and leftover stored vegetables like potatoes, carrots, or turnips. The meat was slow simmered for hours until it fell off the bone. A single groundhog could feed a family of 6 for days, providing valuable winter protein. Groundhog meat was surprisingly tender and flavorful because they had stored up fat during hibernation. Creamy rabbit fricassee is proof that mountain cuisine, although humble, could still be refined. Rabbit was a reliable year-round protein source for mountain families. This dish was a way to transform small game into an elegant meal adorning the Sunday table. Young rabbit was cut into pieces and soaked in brine before preparation. The meat was seasoned with flour and slowly browned in bacon grease. Then it was gently simmered with water or milk, along with wild onions and herbs until the meat fell off the bone. The cooking liquid was then thickened with flour, creating a velvety, creamy sauce. This dish required the cook's skill and patience, turning tough rabbit into tender meat. It not only provided year-round protein, but was also a meal that proved resourcefulness could bring elegance even to the simplest ingredients. Pickled pig's feet was considered a special family treat, filled with working-class pride. This meal is a unique pickling art, transforming pig's feet, a cut often overlooked, into a prized delicacy. It provided protein and rich fat nourishment to get through the long winter. The pig's feet were thoroughly scrubbed and boiled for hours until the meat was tender and the skin was gelatinous. Then, hot vinegar seasoned with bay leaves, peppercorns, and salt was poured over the pig's feet, packed in stone crocks or glass jars. After several weeks of soaking, the dish was ready. This meal helped stretch every part of the valuable pig through the winter. Notably, the gelatin-rich broth was considered especially nourishing for pregnant women and growing children. When enjoyed, the meat falls off the bone. The skin is smooth and full of flavor. In late summer, when sweet corn reached perfect ripeness, a special soup appeared on every table. Corn chowder, a symbol of abundance and kitchen cleverness. This soup turned surplus corn into a hearty meal, enough to feed a crowd while preserving the sweet flavor of the harvest. The secret to making the soup was cutting the fresh corn kernels off the cob and then scraping the cob to extract the sweet, milky liquid. This sweet, milky liquid naturally thickened the soup. The corn and corn milk were combined with diced potatoes, wild onions, and sometimes salt pork or bacon to add flavor. The soup was slow simmered until the potatoes dissolved and the corn released its starch. This was a thick, filling soup that could serve as a complete meal, designed to taste great even when fresh dairy products were scarce. The sweet, salty, and satisfying flavor of this soup was a bowl full of summer sun that could warm the soul anytime. The dishes we just explored aren't expensive delicacies. They are a living heritage. They are powerful proof of the resourcefulness, persistence, and no-waste spirit of the blue-collar generation. The elite might have their fancy restaurants, but they missed out on the most authentic flavors created with sweat and pride. Which dish on this list brought you back to your grandparents' childhood kitchen? Please share your stories and life experiences below. To continue honoring these old values, we introduce you to the video, 25 Cheap Meals Our grandparents ate to survive, where inexpensive ingredients rise up to become the star of the table. Do you want to know how our grandparents utilized potato peels? Or how they managed to feed a family of 6 back then with just 5 cents? Come explore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any other exciting content.